to this episode of the Fireside Chat. I would like to give a little bit of a shout out / toast to an outstanding achievement for our core rulebook, as it's hit the top 1.4 products sold on drive-through and hit platinum, basically in sales.
Woohoo!
So,
Wonderful. Congrats.
Cheers.
um,
Go.
so
I
to
would have brought a
follow.
drink. I should have brought a drink to a
I mean-
fireside chat.
Always with Vikings. Come on.
Exactly. Exactly.
So to follow that up, I guess, I am your host, Aaron Bagelman, and as always with me, I have the legendary bearded creator of Pendlehaven himself, Andrew Valkuku, and of course, my good friend, Ken D. Hitman, streamer, YouTuber extraordinaire.
I'm just the guy.
The guy with the colorful background.
The very colorful background and the many different energy drinks in the corner. But last but not least, and well, also due to introduction order, is our secret, not so secret guest, CEO of Drive Thru RPG, founder and former CEO of White Wolf, and contributing author of RPGs that basically shaped my childhood, Steve Wieck. So, welcome aboard, Steve. We're really happy to have you on. And
Yeah.
well,
Great
we
to see you.
typically like to start off by giving you an opportunity to just kind of explain yourself and kind of like,
Okay.
who you are, what do you do?
Okay, sure. So my day job is running One Bookshelf, which is the parent company that operates many interconnected websites, Drive Thru RPG, DM's Guild, and many others. Drive Thru Comics, Drive Thru Fiction, Wargame Vault, etc. So anything that's geek related, we might have a marketplace for it where we are primarily offering digital products and as well as some print on demand books and card versions as well. We've been around 20 years, if you count going all the way back to when RPG Now was founded by James Matthey. And before that, my life was of course, I started as an RPG nerd in high school. And then my brother and I founded, and along with Mark Reinhagen, founded White Wolf, the game company famous for World of Darkness, Vampire, as well as Exalted and other games. And I was CEO of that company for 10 years through most of the 90s. And then from there, when we sold White Wolf to CCP, the Icelandic Good Viking company, the Icelandic company CCP, when we sold White Wolf to them in 2006, I went to do full-time at One Bookshelf because we had started Drive Thru RPG as a separate company a few years prior to that. And so I went and have been doing that full-time since. So that's sort of my trajectory, I guess, through this.
That's awesome. That caught me by surprise. CCCP Games. So they're the ones that did
Yes.
EVE Online. I didn't realize they were the
You
ones
got
that
it.
first
Really?
bought White Wolf. What was
Yeah,
the
exactly.
purpose? Was that for like a video game that they were trying to do in the 90s, or?
Exactly. Yeah. So at White Wolf, we had several video games that we'd license. Activision did Bloodlines and all this various things that we did licensing wise. But in the mid 2000s, we started to bring all of our licenses back in house, preparing for, essentially to find some sort of venture or joint venture or sale or something that we could really do, because there's the MMO craze was in full swing
Mhm.
still. Not that it's ever really stopped, and we really wanted to get into that space with the World of Darkness. CCP was a great partner, and we met them at various conventions and things, and had like minds. And I've ended up going to Iceland far more times than I would have ever imagined. Beautiful country, great place to go. And yeah, so they bought White Wolf and immediately started production on a World of Darkness MMO game. Which unfortunately the trajectory of which didn't turn out great, and eventually the project got closed down before it ever saw the light of day. And at that point, CCP actually then took all of the White Wolf IP and sold it to Paradox, who is the current owner and operator, and the new White Wolf is a subsidiary of Paradox, which is sort of almost going away, and they're just running White Wolf under the Paradox name at this point. So
Very
it's been
cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And then you stepped into a space that was very much needed, because I remember when we were like just fooling around with Fate of the Norns in the 90s. I mean, it wasn't a commercial venture. I mean, our first edition of Fate of the Norns was about 92, 93. And
Yep.
when we just kind of started spreading it around, it was like on diskettes, like a Word perfect document. We're dating ourselves here.
Exactly.
And then later when PDFs came around, what, in 96, 97, I think we would just mail someone a CD with like a password protected PDF. And then
Right.
when RPG Now came around, we're like, wait a minute, this changes everything.
Mhm.
This is very cool. A
Yes.
whole new medium of distributing our industry. So maybe you
Right.
could talk a little bit about how you came about into the space of
Yeah.
revolutionizing the distribution method, because this is kind of
Sure.
what Steam did to the video game industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Very similar. Very similar. Good metaphor. So James Matthey deserves a lot of the credit because he's the founder of RPG Now. And in 2001, James got the idea, latched on the idea to basically put up a web store that, I mean, this is, and we have to think this is 2001. This is before the iPhone, before the iPad, like iTunes launched. The platform iTunes, where you used to buy music by the track, launched, I think, that year in 2001. So the idea of a shop dedicated to digital goods was pretty early in everyone's thinking at that time. And James went and did it and built RPG Now and attracted various publishers who were early adopters into selling PDFs. Some, like you say, had already been selling digital copies in various ways before that. And now James was giving everybody a platform for people to come to and find all those titles that are available. So he was doing that in 2001. Meanwhile, at White Wolf, we were blowing up the World of Darkness and then restarting it. So when we were launching Vampire the Requiem, which we put a ton of heart and soul and work and money and expense and time and everything else into, and very much in that era as a publisher, you put out your book, and within days of its launch, worldwide launch, someone has taken a copy, scanned it with a home scanner, made a PDF, and is BitTorrenting
Yep.
that PDF around. And so we're like, well, Napster at the time and everything else, you can't stop this. The music industry's a giant. They haven't stopped it. Why would we waste time trying to stop it? But people want this format, so let's create another business and provide that format. So we started Drive Through RPG with the intention of trying to not just offer White Wolf's products, but every major publisher in the industry. So having
Was
been to
this
Gen Con for
was this
15
in
years,
parallel?
yeah,
Was this in parallel with RPG
it
Now?
was in parallel.
Okay.
Yeah. So at
Huh.
first it was in parallel, and I devoted a bit of my time to that and most of my time to White Wolf. But and in the beginning, Drive Through was a pretty humble little website. So, but we were successful in attracting a lot of other major publishers who also were seeing the same issues and were ready to have their titles sold digitally as well. So the first many years of Drive Through was mostly me going around to different conventions like Gen Con, evangelizing this sort of thing to other publishers and saying,
On board.
Chaosium's doing it, we're doing it, who else is in, sort of thing. And a lot of people joined, thankfully. And so it was sort of us and then RPG Now, and we were competitors for a few years in there. Friendly competitors, but competitors. And then in 2006, we decided to join forces and formed One Bookshelf at that time, and RPG Now and Drive Through combined. And then we ran both sites for many years until a few years ago we finally retired RPG Now basically, and just had Drive Through RPG as the one marketplace for RPGs.
And then you guys evolved it to print as well, which was, I think, a big game changer
Yep.
too, right? Like the print on
Mm-hmm.
demand. It's kind of like what 3D printing is doing right now and revolutionizing
Yeah,
that space. But you need to
absolutely.
rewind, I think, what, 15 years
Absolutely.
ago?
Yeah,
Print on demand.
because yeah, even as an RPG publisher still in the early 2000s, we were looking at White Wolf at like, okay, well, we have this clan book or whatever for Vampire, and are we going to reprint it? And how many copies do we want to reprint? And would it be easier just to like cycle small print runs of some of these source books that maybe don't sell as well as clan books or whatever? But the quality of print on demand titles at the time just wasn't quite there. But
Mhm.
then, much as we're seeing with 3D printing, where we're hitting this inflection point where, okay, the resolution on these 3D minis is looking better and better. And like, I'm happy to have that at the table representing my character now. The same thing kind of happened with the quality level of POD finally hit a sweet spot where it was manageable and looked good. And since then it's gotten to look very good. And a lot of people can't tell the difference between a premium color title you get from our drive-through POD program and books that are more like lithographically printed at a large printer. So that changed, and when it changed, and we saw that change, we said, okay, this is great. Let's offer a POD program so that Aaron can come to the site, order any book of thousands of books now in POD, and it'll get printed, and that copy will be put in a mailer and sent to him. It's really revolutionized things.
Yeah, and I think you guys had a really nice onboarding process too, because the very first book that we wanted to digitize was our original 1992-93 anniversary edition back in 2012, before we launched our first Kickstarter. And I forget her name. She's one of your layout gurus there. That I think she still works with you.
Maybe Pauline or Sandra. I don't recall.
Yeah, maybe Pauline. And she basically got on a call with me, and she's like, okay, this is how InDesign works. Or there was the free one as well. I think we used the free one, script. And she walked me through on how to import everything into it and how to produce the print file and everything. And I think that was a big, secret to your success is to actually take the time to bring every single one of these clients that may not be, print savvy or tech savvy, and get them onboarded into your portal. And I think that's kind of what. Also, geez, all your staff names are like on the tip of my tongue. Brian for cards, right? Your drive-through cards. He does a wonderful job as well. Always reaching out. He's very proactive in terms of how can we evolve our card portal to your needs. Tell us about your needs. He comes around at the conventions and whatnot. And I think that's kudos to you guys to have that kind of culture of putting the customer needs first.
Yeah, thanks. I like hearing that. And cards was another thing where that also sort of hit an inflection point where along came the technology to print on-demand cards with a quality that makes it look as good as a retail card you get in any game store. And so suddenly, and then we added that service so that you could do POD card product as well. And that's been a big success for us as well, and is helping a lot of people, whether it's like a role-playing game Card Aid or a standalone card game or whatever. It's been interesting, and the ability to print anything you want on every single different card. We've created these card creators for some card games, right, where you can go in and use a web interface tool we have to design your own card.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, so if you go to drivethroughcards.com, you'll see on the homepage there's some links to things like Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, where you can go and just use the web tool and make your own card, filling in the different things and placing art, and then you can order it and have it in print and shuffle it right into your deck. So it's pretty neat. It's kind of like there's ones for online that aren't maybe strictly legal or licensed for doing this with Magic cards. Right?
Oh boy,
if you want to do that, and it's a similar type of thing. Only here you get to print the card out and have it be official and all of that. So, well, not official, but we've had some people print the engagement cards, and propose using these and all those sorts of fun things you hear about. So yeah.
So
that was fun.
I'm curious, actually. So what would you say is the biggest difficulty of running an online RPG distribution, or just distribution in general? Just
right
from the standpoint of the company.
Well, we having come from a publisher background, I always measure our success basically by how many dollars do we get to send creators and publishers every year, and we've been fortunate that every year, all 20 years we've been in business, we've managed to send people a little bit more money every year that we've been in business. So I've been very thankful for that. But nonetheless, the most frustrating part of it often is convincing people these things are a good idea to do and that you should be taking part Initially, in the early years of the business, it was all about piracy and, oh, my things will just get pirated and all this, and it'll erode brick and mortar sales, or it'll do this, that. Or there were just like a dozen different reasons not to not to try this thing that was something new. These days, it's just an expected part of for customers and publishers and everybody to get a digital product as well. So a lot of those concerns have gone away, though you'll be not surprised to know that anytime we work with really larger publishers, those concerns suddenly reemerge. And it's sort of like, well, okay, you really want DRM? I don't think you really do, but anyway. So we still have those discussions, but beyond that, it's just with any given publisher we work with, often there's some things that we're like, if you just wanted to change this part of how you're doing your digital business, we think you'd get a lot more revenue. We have a top publisher who continues to want to sell all their PDFs for full retail price, same as the books. And, it's just not the right price for a PDF to sell it at exactly the same price as the physical book. It's suboptimal for the publisher, certainly for the customers. But so those are actually the most frustrating parts is saying, we'd like to send you more money and have you see more sales, but.
And many years ago, I remember you guys sent out one like price analysis chart as well that said, if you're selling a book in this format, these are the price points that we saw the most engagement on. And if this
Yes.
is the format of your book, these were the price points that you the most engagement on. That I found extremely, extremely useful. And I also find that in this industry, if people want to quit their day job and actually turn this into a real industry, and actually do this 9 to 5, is you have to value your work. I do see a lot of people that put in 3 years into producing an RPG and then sell it for like, $5 profit, and they nickel and dime themselves out of it completely.
Absolutely, people price too low as well. Sorry to all the customers hearing this, but
but it's true.
But, I mean, you need to be able to get enough money to do this and feel like you're rewarded for professional effort. It was when we first launched DM's Guild in partnership with Wizards. Many of the creators who contributed product on DM's Guild were using what we call the pay what you want pricing, right? Where a customer can come and set what price they want to pay for the title. And that became very widespread. But it's migrated since, and the creators have realized that it's okay if they just expect to be paid for their work, with a more fixed price that gets everyone who wants to enjoy it contributing something, so that they can go on and make the next book even nicer. So
I'm curious.
So we see a lot of underpricing and overpricing.
What was the pay what you want model? What was the lessons learned from that?
Oh, well, many, and we're still learning them. We're still looking to make some modifications in the future to how we, options that we provide publishers and creators for pricing pay what you want. But I mean, certainly some of the things are that it never equals the revenue that you see with a fixed price product. It will almost never equals the revenue. So a lot of times the pay what you want pricing is this mixture between a marketing event, a marketing item. So it's not exactly a free item, but it's also an item that you'll get some revenue on, but just not as much. And it gives a lot of power to the customer and a lot of trust, and opens up sort of this patronage model of, so it's probably used more often than it should be still. But it has a valuable space, I think, in the industry. And kudos to Fred Hicks and Evil Hat and others who have really led the way in finding good uses for it. They helped inspire us, we'll say, to offer that on our marketplace many years ago. So that was very helpful. Yeah.
So I just had a quick question, because we're talking about like difficulties running a distribution, and obviously you're not just shipping in the US, you're shipping to Canada, you're shipping to other places.
Yes.
And we all know in Canada right now our tariffs are ridiculous. How do you kind of like deal with that, or like have you seen like sales gone down because of that kind of situation that we have here?
Yeah. Well, believe me, Canada has nothing on Brexit. But let's start with Canada. That's easier.
You got
I
three
think.
I do
Canadians
want to hear that
here.
point, though.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in Vancouver. I'm in Canada, so it's all good. So Canada is, if I put on my cynical hat, I wonder if there's somebody at something like an Indigo or somewhere that did a little bit of lobbying because when you have Amazon and Barnes and Noble and these chains, there was also a lot done to make sure the big US book chains didn't make inroads into Canada. Trademark registrations of their names in Canada and just lots of interesting stuff that could probably fill business case study books with. But I think one of the things maybe cynically that was done also was that there was laws done to limit books being shipped into Canada. And so, for example, books are one of the only things I know of that you can ship into Canada, and it doesn't matter the value. If it's a penny or it's $200, there's customs that will be assessed on it. So every other good has some threshold where it has to exceed a certain value before you start getting taxed on it, right? But books, it's like zero. Whatever it is, you're going to get taxed on. And so that has in the past led to quite a few difficulties. We use a printer, Lightning Source. It's an Ingram company, and they've got their print plants in the US. Currently, there's none in Canada. So every book that we ship to a Canadian customer or publisher has to be printed in the US and shipped into Canada. But thankfully, they've started a special service where they do broker these across the border now.
Wasn't
And
it
so that's
UK at one point too? You guys were shipping from UK to Canada?
So we used to ship the books bound for Canada. We used to print them in a Lightning Source plant in the UK and ship them across the Atlantic into Canada because the shipping rates were so much lower using Royal Mail from the UK versus just using any service out of the US. So it was crazy. It drove up the delivery times a bit, unfortunately, but the savings, most customers preferred the savings to that. So but that's gone because the US plants have instituted this new program partnering with Purolator to broker the goods into Canada and then disperse them out to the final destination. So it's really helped delivery time. I mean, if you're in Southern Ontario now, you can order a book from us and it'll only be in transit for a week or something to reach you. In addition to the printing time, but
And COVID delays.
so that's helped. Yeah. Whereas Brexit is just a mess, and Lightning Source currently doesn't have a plant we can use to print within the EU. So when Brexit hit earlier this year, we're used to print any books that need to go to Germany or France or wherever. We're printing them in the UK and shipping them into the EU, and that just became a nightmare as of January 1. And then
Okay.
July 1, the EU implemented a whole new set of rules called IOSS, and that was another wave of mess. So yeah, there's a lot of not fun things you get to do as a worldwide
Well, I know
seller as well
Canadians
these days.
will be watching our stream and probably the YouTube video afterwards, and so I just wanted to make sure that question is asked because I remember 5 years ago we would just I had no hair, like we'd just be pulling out our hair going like I ordered a $30 RPG book and I'm getting slapped with UPS or was it DHL duties for like $25. So like it doubled the price of my book and I was just like I'm done with drive-through. Like 5 years ago I would never order an RPG book from the portal, but I'm so glad that you guys have resolved that for Canadian shoppers. So anyone watching?
There
Good.
we go.
We're good.
We're good now.
So we did mention Lightning Source. How did you guys integrate Lightning Source into into the drive-thru RPG? I'm actually curious about that.
Yeah, no, it's a big flow of server communications and FTPing of files and batches and exchanging order information and ship information and getting automatic status updates on where files that are submitted for a printed book go and how we process those. So it's a lot of coding time and a lot of integration effort and syncing of things, but it's it's all doable, and so it's just a lot of server to server communications between us and Lightning Source for all that information. So
I would
yeah.
piggyback on that question is, are you guys looking at integration with other print-on-demand companies? Because for myself, for example, I've used Lightning Source for as long as we've been doing Kickstarters, and they were fine 10 years ago. But I can tell you the last 2-3 years, the quality of the print, the quality of the shipped product in terms of damaged units has skyrocketed in the last year or two. Actually, even pre-pandemic. And so I know a lot of people in my industry, like, you know, they're looking at alternates. And like we looked at Barnes and Noble Print as a good alternative. Are you guys looking at also at possibly alternative print-on-demand companies for integration to even give us, you know, choice?
Absolutely. So we're looking at lots of stuff at any given moment. But some things we're looking at right now are absolutely other book printers that we would integrate with, because there is a lot of different mixes of quality and price out there. When the pandemic hit, especially, Lightning Source's volume went through the roof, and they just couldn't keep up. So our turnaround times on printing became like a month for them to print a hardcover book before it would then ship out to a customer. And their quality went down because I think they were just trying to push too much volume through. And so our defect rate went up, our customer refunds and everything went up. It was all very noticeable, and you're absolutely right, it happened. And that on top of everything else, Lightning Source just this year radically increased the price to print in the US, their premium color books, which is the really nicer books that we do. And it was a really substantial increase because they had made some changes with their presses, which led to basically them missing the boat and having to charge a lot of money for that format now in their US printing. And so that alone was also a driver for us to also look around. The technology's been changing. The actual digital presses used to print these books, a lot of it's gone inkjet now. And a lot of, you know, instead of a toner printer, it's gone to an inkjet-based printer. And so, you know, we're looking at options. I was emailing with people today about options, but it's not an easy business.
Good to hear, though.
Lightning Source does do some things really well. I mean, if in terms of getting a good price for a good looking color book, a standard color book, and, you know, to print one copy and put it in a mailer and send it to a customer, it's, you know, they've got a competitive offering there.
Yeah.
But we're looking at that. And the other thing we're looking at all the time right now is integrating with 3D printers, a service that would print 3D models, and then for those customers who prefer to have the actual model printed and shipped to them instead of just download the file, that could become an option for them as well.
So you're saying another little option on the top of the website might be...
You got it. Never enough options, Andrew.
Drive-through minis, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Drive-through minis.
There you go. So I think there's a lot of interesting uses for that, obviously, in gaming, and a lot of people have already been exploring it. If anything, we're kind of late.
Yeah, if you guys look at is it Hero Forge, the guys that do print on demand, and their minis are even colored. They come out printed and colored, and they look stunning colored.
Yes.
Like, I thought it would just be like monochrome and like.
That's right.
You'd want to paint over it, but I've seen the output, and it's just like, wow, the technology just leaps and bounds.
Yes, exactly. For me, it's a very interesting space, and I could probably talk for about an hour just on 3D printing, but and that option, and, you know, versus like a Reaper Bones mini set, and what your cost is per figure versus getting your Hero Forge figure that you custom tailor with their awesome web interface and get that one unique mini that you're willing to pay, you know, a much higher amount of money for that one mini, and everything in between, from what are the economics of printing dungeon walls to, you know, printing elven figures or whatever. So but there's a lot of aspects to it that are interesting, and we're trying to navigate them and see if there's and we think there's a space in there that it could be useful to publishers and customers to have the option to print 3D. Yeah. Technology keeps evolving so quickly on it too. It's fun to watch. So,
So,
yeah.
so I'm curious, what was like the first project that brought you into the worlds of RPGs, and what drove you
Yeah.
to pursue this career in the industry? So just to dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's go back. So, I was in high school in the late 80s, and even in middle school, I was playing D&D and Slave Lords. I played the Slave Lords module with my high school social studies teacher running it as the dungeon master and all that good stuff, right? So my brother and my older brother Stuart was a year older, and we just would play all the time, just the two of us. And then if we got together with local friends, we'd do that too. And we played a lot of Villains to Vigilantes as a superhero game of choice for us. None of that champion stuff. I mean, we were V&V, right? So, and one day we were just kind of like, well, we like the game. We were writing our own adventures. What if we just like submit one of these adventures to the publisher, Fantasy Games Unlimited? Scott Bazar was running it, and let's just see if they want to publish it. So we didn't know better. We were like 14, 15, 16 years old. We just printed up a copy on our dot matrix printer and put it in an envelope and mailed it out. And they accepted it for publication. And we were shocked, and we were like, wow, like maybe we can actually do this. We can write role-playing games good enough that they can be published. We later learned that Scott basically accepted anything that came in the door. But for us, this was a validation moment, not knowing that. So anyway, so we released our first adventure was Secrets in the Swamp. It was a man thing sort of whatever adventure in for Villains and Vigilantes. And then we went on to write some more adventures for Villains and Vigilantes, as well as one day then Stuart came to me during afternoon break at high school in between class and said, hey, what do you think about starting a magazine? And I said, sure, why not? And so we started White Wolf, what would be White Wolf magazine.
Oh, okay.
We initially called it Arcanum, and we released an issue called Arcanum, but then at that moment, first edition Unearthed Arcana came out from Wizards of the Coast. And, you know, we were sure that the giant up in Wisconsin was going to notice these two nerds down in Georgia putting out their little Arcanum book and sue us for some sort of copyright infringement. So we quickly changed the name to White Wolf Magazine based on reading too much Elric.
I was just about to ask, if you're going to get into your inspiration for the name White Wolf.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've always used the wolf mascot, but the real inspiration for the name was of course Elric's nickname in Michael Moorcock's literature. So.
Did you ever try to license that?
Well, we at one time at White Wolf had a fiction division, and we published Michael Moorcock's books. We put out some really nice omnibus collections. If I could pause the video, I could even pull one out. Pardon me a moment.
Yeah, well, we're streaming, so it'd be hard to pause. But go for it. Go for it.
Am I in focus anymore?
You will be.
There you go.
Oh.
So
That's
this was,
nice.
This was one of the books that we put out. We published the whole Eternal Champions series in a series of hard trade covers, and we also did Lankmar, and we did Harlan Ellison, and we published a lot of cool books. But for us, doing Moorcock's works was like this full circle moment for us, right? Where we got to be publishing the works that we named the company.
Yeah, because when I figured it out afterwards, like this is years later, I connected the dots. I'm like, oh, this is like White Wolf as in Elric.
Exactly.
All of my Elric stuff was non-White Wolf RPGs. So I was like, that doesn't connect. How come, White Wolf didn't have this IP?
No, I know. Chaosium had the game, and we played a lot of that too. That was good fun. It was fun.
Sorry, I sidetracked you. Keep going.
No, it's all good. So anyway, we got this early validation, whether it was true or not, that we could write games. So then we started the magazine, and we were literally photocopying it on our high school photocopy machine after school hours. and hand collating copies. And there was a local game store in Chattanooga, Tennessee that would let us sell some copies off the shelf there in various ways. And Bob Carty, who later became famous for being part of Catan, Settlers of Catan, and Mayfair Games being so successful. Bob Carty at the time was managing a small game distributor called Glenwood, I think it was. And we saw him at a show once, and he said, "I'll order 30 copies of this from you guys." And we were just like, "Wow, 30 copies. Wow, awesome." So anyway, we had the fanzine for years. It just sort of kept getting a little bit better. And we were friends with Mark Reinhagen, who and other people at this small company called Lion Rampant out of Minnesota that was producing the Ars Magica role-playing game, among other things. And they relocated their company down to Atlanta. And at that time, we all partnered together with Mark. And that's when White Wolf, as people really know it, began. And the first big hit was Vampire the Masquerade in 1991. So, but Lion Rampant is something that younger gamers probably don't realize. There's incredible amount of star power, if I can call it star power, that came out of that little company out of Minnesota. Because you have Jonathan Nephew, who went on to form Atlas Games. You had Nicole Lindroos, who is Green Ronin. You had Lisa Stevens, who went on to help found Wizards of the Coast with Peter Atkinson.
Oh, wow.
And then when she left there, went on to found Paizo.
Didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Oh.
Jonathan Tweet, who went on to work at Wizards and do Everway and 3rd edition D&D and many other things. And then Mark Reinhagen, who of course stayed and was part of the White Wolf that did all the World of Darkness games and everything else. So the amount of,
Incubation of
amazing.
talent and
incubation of talent that came out of that
entrepreneurship.
one little. It's crazy.
And
crazy
is Lion Rampant in Canada, the distributor out of Toronto, are they in any way
Completely
affiliated? Okay, no.
No,
Okay.
yeah, completely different thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was curious.
right. No, yeah, similar but different. Similar name but different, totally different companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know.
Mhm.
Oh, I think everyone's gonna ask the same question, but I know we were kind of joking around about the whole wizard situation and stuff like that. But like honestly, when you guys founded White Wolf, did you have any actual issue with wizards since you guys were competing, technically speaking?
Right.
You know?
Right. No, not really. I mean, we had one of the very early issues of White Wolf magazine on the last page of it. That's like our subscription offer page or something. There's a half-page piece of art on the bottom of it, which has this big dire size white wolf, like pinning down this dragon and like, crushing it down beneath its paws and jaws. And Richard Thomas drew it. And so our sort of early hubris was showing its roots already. And then all through the 90s, of course, Vampire and White Wolf, we were always the number 2 company to TSR and Dungeons and Dragons. And there were a few times, especially when TSR started having a lot of woes that led to their bankruptcy and sale to Wizards of the Coast, where they didn't have a lot of product in market, and White Wolf was the number 1 role-playing company for some months in there at least. But it was always, we were sort of always the Pepsi to the Coke and all this sort of.
Yeah, I never saw you guys as even in competition. I saw the players that would play in the 80s and 90s, let's say Vampire versus D&D in the early 90s. It would be completely different types of players. It would be narrative-based players versus the number crunchers that want to go kick down a door and roll for initiative versus the ones that want to start some intrigue between houses of vampires,
Right.
and the whole LARP scene that it spawned afterwards, right? That all started, I think, with Vampire. I don't think there was any LARPing before.
Well, I mean,
Vampire.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the first LARP, but it was the one that exploded LARPing.
Yeah,
it had the most organized, I find, because LARPing back in the day used to be a bunch of nerds in the woods.
Yeah, they scared me.
Sticks, right?
Yeah.
but I guess the difference was especially because Vampire had such good lore that was really easy to put in a modern world because it had the modern setting. I found. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very different. We sold a lot to Hot Topic actually. Hot Topic sold a lot of Book of Nods. If you remember the Book of Nod product, like they sold the heck out of that book. And
Who's Hot
because
Topic?
it's
I don't know Hot
Oh,
Topic.
sorry. Hot Topic is is a retail chain in the
Okay.
U.S. and parts of Canada. I know we have them here in the west coast of Canada that sell just sort of popular
Oh,
license. So
okay.
that right now you go in there and it's a lot of anime stuff because that's what's popular with.
Anime. Oh
Andrew,
yeah, it's huge.
we'll pass by. We'll pass by Andrew when we go to
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
We'll pass
Yeah,
by.
educate the old man.
Yeah.
Educate the old man.
I'll show you all the cool stuff in Hot Topics.
Yeah, exactly. But it just spoke to there were some cultural differences there between what was going on. And it was really hard initially at White Wolf to sell the titles that we wanted to create through a distribution channel that had started up barely wanting to sell Dungeons and Dragons. And by that I mean so Dungeons and Dragons became this totally new hobby. Basically, it was like spawning this completely new hobby, and everybody often thinks it's a new hobby and people are getting used to playing and it's exploding in popularity, but there's a sort of business structure. Well, there's no bookstore that just already had a role-playing game section because role-playing games didn't exist yet. So and what kind of stores want to sell these goods? And in the early days, a lot of the stores that would sell Dungeons and Dragons and then Chaosium and other role-playing games that came along were like stores that already sold hobby goods. So there's a lot of hobby train stores and these weird kind of stores that would just sell D&D in the corner next to the hobby trains.
Yeah.
And then we came along, and D&D was like one thing, and then you had or the teenagers going down in sewers and doing weird things and, chick track, Christian, whatever. And, that was problematic enough for many of these store owners to not want to hear from parents coming in saying, why are you selling this stuff? And then we give them White Wolf books to sell.
Oh boy,
and that's like a whole
that's
other
like
level.
you're on another level.
Yeah.
I work with Ed Greenwood now for a couple of projects that we've been going on, and sometimes we just go down the rabbit hole just talking about stories. And he tells me some of his Satanic Panic stories from the 80s. And I could just imagine now you guys with White Wolf and the books that you were creating, you must have had, like, I don't know, some ticket lines outside your offices or nasty letters at the very least. Because he had people walking into his public library where he was working, and they would confront him, like, right there on the spot of, like, how dare you be doing this to, my grandchild.
Right, yes. I've never read this book, but I hear it's awful for
Yes.
my grandchild. Yes. We had in the early days, I mean, Stuart and I were in Dalton, Georgia area, and more, not super rural, but it's a rural corner of Northwest Georgia. And so to get one of the early issues of White Wolf magazine printed, we went to a local print shop, and we showed up 2 weeks later to get our books, and the gentleman came to the counter and said, "Now, boys, I couldn't print this book, and I want to tell you why." And, it was because it had a Medusa on the cover, which I don't think he knew was Greek mythology, and just like, we don't do the demon stuff, and and I'm like, it's a Medusa, it's just Greek myth, it's not. And anyway, so there were always challenges of people who distributors. I mean, when White Wolf got going, and we actually were printing some mature content in some of the books. I mean, we dared to print swear words in some of our books. I mean, it was radical. It was radical. So, but there were distributors who didn't want to carry the books, and it was challenging.
So so there's actually a rumor going on. Okay, so I heard that there was a massive book burning in one of your warehouses. We're just kind of curious, how true is that story? Because obviously with all this kind of stuff you were doing at the time, it kind of felt like demons, and especially in that 80s, I could totally see that happening.
Right.
But also, it kind of seems ridiculous to burn out a whole warehouse. So I want to know, how's that rumor? Is that real? Are we just making up stuff now?
I think that one's just rumor. But we did have some great warehouse parties. Dragon Con was a big convention in Atlanta, and White Wolf was based just outside of Atlanta, to the east of it in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And so at Dragon Con, our company car at White Wolf was a hearse, naturally, like you do. So we would just pull the hearse up to Dragon Con, guests would load into the back of the hearse, and we'd drive them out to Stone Mountain to our warehouse party out there, and that was our shuttle vehicle for the party night. But yeah, and we would throw lots of different club parties at Gen Cons, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, the liability of things that we did, I don't even want to think about, but you
got away
it
with
all
it.
worked out. Yeah, it all worked out. So,
You're young and stupid, and then think of all the consequences.
Yes, or didn't want to think about them long enough to do anything about it. So,
exactly. Do you miss it at all, running a publishing company? Because I know you've got your hands full,
absolutely.
but I mean, I see the joy in your face and your eyes as you speak of the old White Wolf days. I mean,
well, sure, it was fantastic years, and there's nothing that replaces publishing in terms of getting to be in the creative end of the industry. That's always going to be a lot of fun. And not that I don't have fun doing what I'm doing, and I do have a lot of fun, and we have a great group that I get to work with, like you were mentioning some of the folks earlier. So I couldn't be pleased or more happy, but I just there is something, of course, getting into the guts. These days I have to make my own campaign and do the more normal gamer stuff to get my creative fix in, since I'm not publishing anything these days myself. Maybe my retirement will be one day we'll be getting back into RPG publishing.
Why not? You're never too old.
Why not? Never too old. Do I need to grow my beard longer then? Maybe, I guess. Right?
You'd fit in here.
Yes.
I'll say
exactly.
That.
There you go.
Ken, though, you got to work on yours. It's a little wispy down there.
I can literally not grow more than this. It's just not humanly possible. This taking me like 6-7 years just to get here. Maybe when I'm 50, Andrew.
So, if you were to go back in time and restart your career in RPGs, what would you do differently?
Well, invent Magic the Gathering. No, that's not an RPG.
That's a good one, though. That's a damn good one.
That's a good answer, actually.
I would invent Pokemon cards.
Wouldn't we all?
Yes, also a good idea. Yeah. Good one. I was at a game. There's a trade show for gaming every spring called the Gamma Trade Show, and it's been running for forever. And I was at the Gamma Trade Show in it would have been, I don't know, early 90s, 93, I guess it would have been, or something, 93, 94. Anyway, Peter Atkinson, I met him for the first time, came with Lisa Stevens, and they said, hey, Steve, we're doing this new game, Magic the Gathering, and we want to advertise in White Wolf magazine. But what we're doing with all the artists and marketing partners is we're actually giving them shares in the company instead of giving them money. So we'd like to place ads to advertise this card game we're going to release, and but we don't want to, pay for. We want to give you shares. And I said, Lisa, we love you. Peter, good to meet you. Sure, we'll do it. And some months later, then they start sending ads in, and the guy who's running the magazine for us at the time, Chris McDonough, comes to me and says, hey, Steve, they're sending a lot of ads. They want to just have all these ad coverage. And I'm like, okay, can you just tell Lisa we love you, but maybe we could just slim it down a little bit? We don't want, And so there was never a more expensive decision I've made in my life, maybe, than cutting down the number of shares of Wizards of the Coast stock we got based on how many ads we ran in the magazine.
But you still got some.
We got some.
Yeah,
we got some.
At least you didn't say no.
I'm not complaining.
I was waiting for the story where you go just tell her the deal's off.
I just said
no.
I love you, but I can't do it. I was like, oh no.
To this day, I wish I had actually played Magic before we made that decision, because then I wonder if I would have.
You probably would. I feel like, because you would enjoy the game, right?
Yeah,
exactly. I'd be like, wow, this is special.
I remember I was there in Gen Con 93 or 94. I remember it was beta or unlimited at that time. Mm-hmm. And I remember they had supply issues. They didn't have enough stock for the show. And the stuff just disappeared. And I was like, what is this stuff? I'm talking to them, and the stuff just disappearing from the booth. And I'm like, explain the game. They're like,
next year.
And they're like,
Yeah.
They're like, we've got nothing left to show you, and I'm like,
Right.
this looks really interesting, and they're like, months later, someone shows me the game, and I'm like, damn it,
Yes.
I missed out.
Wow, missed out. But how could you not miss out? There was nothing to get.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's okay, Andrew. You kept most of your stuff, so you didn't really miss out in the end because you already believed in the product at the time. So now
I
it's
still have some of the
Yes.
old cards, but I can tell you
Exactly.
95% of all those boxes and everything on. It flew the coop.
Yeah.
I remember when they hit $30. I had a fire
Right.
sale. I was just like, $30? Who are these idiots? They're going to pay $30 for the piece of cardboard. All my boxes are going tonight. $30.
Bitcoin's hit
$30,000
$5. Let's sell.
Oh,
So yeah, but what would I do differently? I would have made a few changes. I mean, one, I love, like, I wouldn't have to change a thing because it was wonderful. But okay, most of it was wonderful. There were a few dark periods of White Wolf history where business wasn't great for a few years. But I think I would probably go back and we would do more what Wizards of the Coast has been doing, even though they've been criticized for it. They've been releasing very few titles, relatively few titles for 5th edition. And I would go back and I would focus on releasing fewer titles than we did at times at White Wolf. Fewer titles and just put that much more time and creative energy into each one of them that we did release. I think would have been a saner mode for publishing and probably a better mode for publishing. Because in publishing, you make really way more money on your next copy sold, just the way the economics of it work out, because there's a fixed price investment for all your art and your writing and all this other stuff. Yeah, some of it's royalty based, but and especially if you're doing lithographic printing, then it's like a big setup charge, whether you're going to run one copy or 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies. And so the more you can make a fewer titles sell better, the better off you are as a publisher. And I think the better off you are creatively because you're not getting burned out. You're putting everything you got into fewer titles. So
That's actually good
I would do
feedback
that.
because that's something that I struggle with in terms of, are we releasing stuff fast enough? Should we be releasing a lot more frequently, to get into your newsletters? And we release really like 1 or 2 titles a year, like big ones. And like right now, we
Yes.
just released Children of Eriu. I think I
Yes.
sent Matt
Right.
an email if we can get into your newsletter. And I
Yeah.
said, like, this is our release for the year. Like, this is
Yeah.
our big one.
But it's a big 500-page.
It is. It's
major.
a beast. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a beast.
Yeah.
And with the printing
Yeah.
cost, that was one of the things that I was so happy that none of my Kickstarter backers actually complained, because when we first kickstarted this, like a year and a bit ago, we said, it's going to be probably $25 because we said it was going to be maybe 365 pages at the old print costs. If you remember,
Right.
Lightning Source's
Yes.
old print costs, pre-pandemic,
Yes.
free paper, shooting
Right.
through the roof. And
Yeah.
so now we overshot our page count to 500, and this is after we took 2 months to try and slim down the book from 800 pages to 500 pages.
Nearly 500.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
with all the price hikes, it came out to like $34-$35 for just the print cost of the book.
Yeah.
Because now they're forcing us on 70-pound paper, right? Through you guys?
Yep.
Like going direct to them, we can maybe get away with 50-pound paper, but through you guys, we're forced to go 70-pound paper, even with standard print. And so at that point, it's like, that's what I explained to my backers. And sorry, guys, for the pod backers. And thankfully, like, everyone understood. But that's just kind of the crazy thoughts that I end up like always juggling is like, maybe we should be going for 5 releases a year of these small books that are like, paperback sized, like Fudge or Dread or something like that, or 10 Candles, and instead of these monstrous books. But I don't know. It's good to hear that you're saying that.
Well, you won't like my other piece of what I would change then, Andrew.
Sure,
because
go.
the
No,
other piece
I
of what I
want to
would
hear
change
it. Yeah,
is that
as you see the
over
numbers.
time, over time, most editions of Vampire Exalted or other games carried on what is becoming epidemic in the industry, which is a bloat, rule book size bloat. And you're getting core rule books that just keep trending bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that's ultimately a disservice to everybody involved. I don't think we ever had a game or a supplement written at White Wolf that didn't come in like 20% over word count. I don't know why, but RPG writers are just notorious for like oversupplying words.
I'm looking at Exalted on my bookshelf over there.
Yeah, exactly. And but what it does is it makes it like, okay, now I have this book that's like so thick I can, press flowers, whatever. And but it's just an entry barrier
Yeah.
to like, well, how easy is it for me to pick up this game? Oh, I got to read 500 pages, like, and it ultimately limits the audience. And the audience would be just as happy if you could keep the rule book slimmer, I
Yep.
believe, and release all of that as supplementary material.
That's what we're trying to do right now with our next Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So now that we're finished delivering, we're ramping up. In a week, we're launching our Ultimate Viking Anthology. And in that, we have a city box set that Ed and I have been working
Okay.
on for a year.
Yes.
And in there, we're
Okay.
going to have like a rule book, which is, again, like a digest size, like something like this, which is going to
Yes.
have just the rules, another little book, which is just going to be character creation. And then he's
Yep.
providing 2 books, which is all the people that live in the city and all the city blocks. And you've got these 4 little books.
Yeah.
And we don't want people to feel like they're overwhelmed, right? It's like
Yes.
tiny little books. If you don't
Yep.
want to use our system, just take the 2 books that Ed wrote and you could plug them into 5e or Pathfinder
Okay.
or whatever else you want to do
Yeah. That's
in another
neat.
system.
Yeah.
And it
So it's sort of
becomes more
modular that
modular.
way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
kind of the goal that we're looking at.
That's neat. Yeah.
So I'm trying different things, like see
Yeah.
what kind of sticks. Because even though I've
Right.
been doing this for 10 years, it's like you're always learning. And
Always
I
learning.
think the key is always to listen to people that have like walked in those shoes before, and what
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
they do right, what did they do
Right.
wrong, and try to
Yeah.
pick that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of my most common pieces of advice for people who are new to writing or publishing in the industry is make your first book super small. Like if it's your very first thing, just do a 16-page PDF and just to practice publishing. And don't start with your dream project. Start with something that's very small, and then work up from there. Because you just learn a lot of lessons, and a lot of those lessons are easier learned on a 16-page work than a 160-page work or a 400-page work. And so, yeah, but that sounds great. That sounds exciting. That sounds like a neat product.
Yeah,
So,
we're going to do the pod version, obviously, which you can get directly from DriveThruRPG. But then there'll be
Yep.
the option, which will be you can get this as an old-fashioned box set, like city box set.
yeah,
I miss those,
right.
like the
Yeah, oh,
City
they're
of
great. They're still
Greyhawk
great.
or
Yeah,
Waterdeep.
yeah,
But the one thing that Ed was telling me, that the reason TSR stopped producing those is those boxes were so flimsy that they would have so much inventory damage by the time they would be shipped to and from shows that there wasn't
Yep.
enough content. It was like low GSM, and everything would just get compacted and destroyed, and they'd
Yep.
keep throwing stuff out. And I said, it's changed so much now. Like you buy one of those new board games on Kickstarter, you can throw it from a 15-story building. It'll land on the sidewalk, and everything's fine inside. Like
Yeah.
the thickness of those boxes are incredible,
Yes.
and we can
Yes.
tailor it exactly to the size of the contents inside right
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
Like once it's done, we know what our page count. We can get the box exactly for what the contents are, and yeah, that'll be the other option. So it's we're lucky that we've got those kinds of options in terms of manufacturing on demand. Like, everything's changing and becoming easier and easier for people in our industry.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, I hope that's a lot of what it was very fortuitous that PDFs with RPG Now and whatnot came out around the same time that Ryan Dancy and crew at Wizards at the time did the open game license for 3rd edition. So suddenly all these entry barriers to writing your own role-playing game and getting it published were just torn asunder, because now you didn't have to pay for a print run, and you didn't have to try to establish your new game amidst the sea of competition out there. You could actually just write for Dungeons and Dragons game and release it without having to do a print run. And all that in combination was pretty powerful to let a lot of new voices start publishing. So, and that's what we try to do with the community content programs we do too now through DM's Guild and Pathfinder Infinite and Storytellers Vault. So you can go to go to our sites and really publish for nearly any of the popular games out there. Well, I'll say many of the popular games out there. You can put out your own kind of community content, but semi-official content for that game. Because we just really want to keep those barriers low to people who want to create and want to write to do their thing.
That's just awesome.
Yeah, so we are actually running out of time very soon, but let me ask you one more question. Let me ask you, what is your favorite RPG, as well as what is your favorite that you've made?
Oh,
it's a good good one.
That's all tough. Favorite that I've worked on would have to be Mage the Ascension.
Okay.
It's still something that I'm really proud of. My brother and I, and there we go. And then the game has been expanded by many people since. So, but the original genesis of it was a lot of work by my brother and I, and so that's always going to be big in my mind. And it was a pivotal thing for me to create personally. And then my favorite RPG is, that's really tough. I'll say one of my favorites is, there was a mechanic in, I think it was first edition of the L5R role-playing game that Alderac published at the time. And there was a bid mechanic when your two samurai come up to each other to duel. And you had this bid mechanic where you'd bid essentially what target number you needed to hit. And you just kept bidding it up until one of you didn't want to bid anymore. And then you'd make your roll with it was the roll and keep kind of system. You'd make your roll to see if you hit your number or not. And I just thought that was a great modeling of that tension and the honor and just all of it encapsulated in one nice little mechanic there. So I always remember that as one of the many examples in RPG design that I thought was really interesting. So
good choice.
But there's so many. So I in fact love like Dread and 10 Candles and all of these things that are coming out that just really throw really interesting advancements into the hobby and new ways to look at it and experience it. So
awesome.
That's the thing with Kickstarters, it's really taken away all the gatekeepers in our industry.
Yes,
and
also
great
lowered the
ideas.
entry barriers.
All these great ideas that before you could say, like Milton Bradley or Hasbro would say, like, what's your target audience? And you'd say 10,000 people. And they'd be like, that's way too small. Like, get out of my office. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's like, there's 10,000 people in the world that are just over the moon happy that you're producing the stuff for them. And they're just like, pre-ordering the next thing that you're going to be creating for them. It's fantastic. And there's so much creativity out there. That's one of my joys, is just to walk the show floor and see especially like the new whenever there's like a new alley, like a new designer's alley or whatnot, and just hear their elevator pitches of these brand new ideas that are like bringing up.
That's
crazy. It's
crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
we're lucky.
Yeah, the hobby's only getting going.
Yep.
It can only get better, I guess. So
yeah.
All right, Steve.
This is awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was very fun listening to you. It was very insightful. Good laugh. Guys, thank you guys so much for being so awesome. Great stuff today. Next week, we do have Mr. Ed Bourrel. I don't know if I said the name right. He is a part of Mork Borg RPG, so make sure to stay tuned. Actually, Andrew, we might also have a Sunday secret stream. Is that correct? With Mr.
Vincent Pompetti, our artist.
Do we know what date that's going to be on? Or
2 weeks from now. So not this weekend, the following weekend. We'll have him on the Fireside Chat on a weekend because he's from France. And so we can't get him on during the week. So we're going to have a special episode just with Vincent because he's part of our next Kickstarter. We're going to be talking with him about our project.
So that's going to be on the 27th. So actually, on that whole 2 weeks, we're going to have quite a bit of content. So if you haven't yet, make sure to follow us on Twitch. Sorry, I'm copying what Andrew says.
To me.
He says it all the time. I follow.
Please don't.
Like, share, and subscribe as usual. And thanks for watching, guys. If you guys have a drink, this is time you grab a drink and scold. I don't know if anyone else have a drink, but
skull.
Skull.